Nigel Brown and I'm District Vet from Glen Innes with Northern Tablelands Local Land Services. I'm here today in the rather scrumptious surroundings of the UNE Smart Farm, University of New England, to talk with a few people, properly socially distanced of course, about water. We've had a lot of problems over the last months, years with inadequate water. Now in some cases we've actually come to the other extreme. But I'm talking with several people to ask them their opinions and to try and sort out some of the many different problems that we LLS have faced and been questions we've been asked during the drought. So, may I now introduce our first truly scrumptious speaker, Todd Andrews. Todd is Beef Development Officer with DPI, based here in Armidale. I think I'm right there, Todd?
Spot on.
And so we're going to have a brief chat about practical things, water with livestock. So I suppose the first thing is to get you, the viewer, to think about how your own water system held up during your drought. Did you have more than enough water? Perhaps you could utilise it properly. So, Todd, for many producers, water supplies became very strained and often dictated stock sales. Todd, what are the opportunities for people to improve water supplies for the future? Because inevitably.
Yeah, Nigel, I guess there are a couple of options. And first is to actually increase your water supply. And so there's a couple of strategies available there. First is that producers should be aware of their harvestable rights associated with their land. And their harvestable water rights is 10% of their average annual rainfall that falls over the whole area of their land. And that volume of water producers have access to, and they don't need a license to store that amount of water. So if their storage is less than that, definitely something for them to look into. The other thing that producers may not be aware of is their right to stock in domestic water. And so that means that producers do have legal access without needing a license to surrounding water supplies, but also underground aquifers. They would need a license to access the water with a bore or a dam. But that is also something producers may not be aware of. And the second strategy would be to use their existing supply more efficiently. So a lot of producers would have taken the opportunity over the last few months prior to rain to clean out their dams. Now that is really important because you're not increasing the surface area, but you're obviously increasing your storage capacity. But deeper dams allow mixing of layers, so it prevents the water from heating up, and it also prevents nutrients concentrating. They stay diluted with the mixing of the water layers, and so both of those things, cool water and low nutrient roads, are really important for minimising algal blooms, but also outbreaks of other aquatic weeds, which can reduce stock access to water.
Right. So with that, what about the mud in the bottom of the old dams? Is that a problem?
Yes. Fencing off dams is another option, or not even fencing off, but supplying water troughs outside of dams. So that has a number of beneficial effects of reducing stock access to dams. So first thing is, we had a number of reports of weakened stock actually dying around the edges of dams trying to access water. So major loss when you consider what those animals would be worth, at today's prices. So that's really important. And you have like the indirect losses of the pugging and dirting of the water, so stock won't drink as much, or they'll refuse to drink it at all. And then you have the problems of stock, but also wild and feral animals going into the water. You've got manure and urine going into the water, which can cause direct problems with potential diseases such as leptospirosis or E. coli.
So the advantages of troughs, what are they?
So what they really allow is a lot more flexibility for location of water supply compared to dams. And so it allows producers to strategically place those troughs to really utilise all of the pasture availability. You know, producers in this pasture, I had numerous reports of, you know, some dry feed being available on the hills, but stock not willing to go there because it was too far from water supplies. So there is a potential to strategically place troughs, sometimes away from shade or other areas where stock like to congregate, to encourage movement, stock movement across tracks, and therefore to utilise water supply. You know, often get the question, should I have shade over water troughs? And to that I would say it depends how much shade is in the paddock. So if there's limited shade and you have shade over your trough, then you're going to get stock congregating there. And that means you've got potential for manure and urine to go into the troughs. You've got potential for dominant animals to kind of manage access to the trough. And you also have, you know, potential for, you know, erosion around the trough, but also reduced paddock feed utilisation, so overgrazing around that area and less utilisation further away from the trough.
Could I ask, you talked about it being too far to get to water. For different classes of stock, what's too far?
Well, in general, we would say that sheep would, you know, go sort of 2.5 k's from water, and cattle can go a bit further, roughly twice that, up to 5 k's. But as we know, as you get further into drought, stock get weakened, and especially cows with calves, you know, rapidly lose energy. Pasture loses its energy, and it also becomes a lot drier. So stock need to drink a lot more. This past drought was characterised by, you know, record-breaking temperatures, a lot of wind, so that meant stock were really thirsty, and so you know, access to water became ever more important.
You were talking about the importance of water quality. What's the actual impact of water quality on stock health?
Well, good quality water is really vital for animal health and for adequate weight gain. So there's just that general health component, but there also can be really specific things such as urinary calculi in wethers and steers. So really important for maintaining intake, your feed intake. And so if you haven't got good feed intake, you know, you haven't got good weight gain. And one of the features of this past drought was really big discounts for stock that were poor. And so, you know, avoiding weight loss wherever possible is definitely something to take out of this past drought.
So within water, just stood on the top, if I'm looking at these dams, I'm seeing turbid, dirty water.
Yeah, that's right. So there are a number of components of water quality. So you know, producers would be aware of potential for salts to reduce intake, and especially if stock have access to licks, and licks are often based on salt. So if your water is salty on top of that, water intake will be reduced. So saltiness is a major potential water impact on water quality. So producers that are accessing new supplies for the future can get their saltiness tested as total dissolved salts or as electrical conductivity. So you've got dissolved salts, you've got turbidity or muddiness, and so that is you know, what we might have seen after storms this year. So how much floating debris and silt is in the water. So that's a component of water quality. You have things like algae, so obviously potentially toxic blue-green algae, but other algae and also floating aquatic weeds, which can form really thick masses.
So obviously there's a lot of technical information and figures and so forth. So where can people get all that? Because I don't want you to recite it out now.
Yeah, so water quality test kits are available from local land services offices, and so it's really easy to, you know, get a test kit, send off your water sample to the New South Wales lab in Wollongbar, and your feedback is really comprehensive in terms of interpreting the water quality. So they'll give you an interpretation of those water quality measurements. and some recommendations about what they're suitable for in terms of both cropping, stock, but also domestically.
So we'll make certain we give people the details on those prime facts. So just changing topic a little bit, a lot of people around the area have moved stock into containment areas for drought feeding. Lots of pros, lots of cons. What are specific aspects of water related to that?
So, Nigel, most producers are aiming for productivity feeding in their stock containment areas. So that means high grain ration diets and trying to maximise growth. And so water quality becomes even more important there. We mentioned about the importance of water quality in terms of maintaining, maximising intake and therefore growth rate. So there are a couple of things that producers need to take note of in their stock containment areas. How could producers know that they might have an issue? Well, producers need to observe stock. So if they're hanging around water supply but not drinking, you've got a congregation of animals, maybe they are trying to drink from closer to the inlet valve, or maybe they're drinking a lot more after the trough has been cleaned. That might be an indication that you need to either clean troughs more regularly or that you have a water quality issue. So some of the things that can happen, obviously, you build a stock containment area or utilise them in drought. Droughts are dusty. So stock do not like to drink from water supplies that have got that layer of dust on the top. Sheep in particular do not like that, and it can affect intake. So how can you manage that? Well, the first and most important thing is to have your animal density right in your pen, and having enough density of animals so that you get that build-up of manure and urine, and you get that absorbent pad there, which is really good as a dust suppressant. The other thing is ensuring that roadways are potentially not too close to your lots or not on the windward side of lots, or if that's unavoidable, you have to do that, then make sure they're sealed with something which minimises dust. So dust is the first thing. The other thing is we mentioned that the stock are often on high grain diets, and it's important that water supply not be adjacent to feed troughs, because often stock will have something to eat and then go and have a drink. And so any grain or other matter that falls from the mouth into the stock can ferment or sour the water. So at least 10 metres away. Ideally at the other end of the pen, but at least 10 metres away. The other thing about containment areas is that often it might be set up as a temporary structure, so producers might use black poly pipe and black poly troughs. These are really prone to heating up, and stock don't like hot water. It can affect intake. And so there's some of the things that producers can be aware of in their stock containment areas.
When you were saying enough trough space, did you have a sort of figure in mind for animals?
Yeah, look, we talked before about dominant animals kind of liking to be the managers of both feed and water troughs, and so we've got really good information in our stock containment prime fact about adequate trough space for numbers of head.
You mentioned earlier on about urinary calculi, and I know I've seen quite a few cases this last 12 months of urinary calculi. What's your opinion on how to prevent those, and how do they sort of start and develop?
Well, we mentioned that in stock containment areas, but also in supplementary feeders that might be out in the paddock, that the stock are on high grain diets. So often, nutrient imbalances can occur, and so it is really important to have adequate stock water there that stock want to drink as much as they can, and that helps flush out nutrient imbalances and stops these kidney stones, if you like, or these stones from building up. They're potentially fatal, and we saw quite isolated outbreaks, severe outbreaks, but in different areas. So definitely something to be aware of.
And with bore water versus runoff dam water, any difference there, or streams even?
Well, in terms of, yes, the saltiness. And so if any water supply is more salty, that might cause stock to drink less. And we mentioned that if they have access to salt licks or other supplements that might have salt, if your water source is also salty, then they're going to drink less. And the fact that they're drinking less, you're not getting this flushing of any nutrient imbalances, really helps to keep things, it helps animals to filter out any excess or nutrient imbalances.
And so moving on a bit further along this sort of water story, since we've had the drought changing, we've had storms, we've had runoff, we've had fire, which has put a lot of ash onto the ground.
Mm-hmm.
What impacts are those going to have had on water?
Yeah, look, we've had a lot of inquiry from producers that look at their dams and see that it's holding a lot of either ash or sediment. Now it looks pretty bad. For the most part, it looks worse than what it actually is. And so what I would say is that if your stock are hanging around their water source but not wanting to drink, then you've got an issue and you need to supply alternative water. But if they're drinking, then it should be okay. You can actually treat water supplies to take out, to settle the sediment out, and we've got a really good prime fact on that, on treating stock water to clean it up. The other thing, is to try and prevent that issue. So there's a couple of things there. So first is to not feed stock in the immediate catchment of dams, because when you do that, you've got a lot of pulverisation of the soil, so you've got lots of ground cover, but you've got pulverisation, so you've got a lot of dust there, which is can run off really easily. And the other thing is that you've got a loss of ground cover there, and so there's nothing to trap it. One of the things that talking about ground cover, we've had a lot of emphasis in extension about maintaining ground cover, and I think producers have really taken that message on board. So one thing about increasing ground cover is it's really good for minimising runoff, maximising water infiltration. Great for pastures, but not as good for surface water supplies. So, we've noticed a lot of producers sort of say that they haven't, their water supplies have run down quicker than normal. And one thing has been the record temperatures and the wind. The other thing is the increased ground cover has actually reduced runoff. And so a lot of producers that have moved towards higher intensity grazing, so rotational or even cell grazing, often find that they have to source additional water supplies, and that is often groundwater.
And mercifully taking it on to the next step. I had to go to a place the other day, he couldn't even find all his sheep to muster them, there was so much. Does that have an impact on animals accessing water?
Yeah, what we've seen, Nigel, since the rain is this incredible growth of pasture. I don't think anyone, thought how quickly it could turn around where it has, which has been fantastic. But I've had a couple of reports of actually producers that noticed their stock either not being able to find water or their growth rates haven't been as good, and that they've been supplementary feeding sheep and wondering what's going on. And they've concluded that it's just taking a lot of energy for stock to make their way through this really tall pasture and looking for water. So they've actually slashed tracks to the water supply, and that has improved growth rates. And the other thing is a lot of producers would have purchased stock from outside. And so it's important not to assume that nature will take its course and that they'll find water. They will eventually, but if you can show new mobs or new herds where water supplies are when they first go into a paddock, that's really beneficial for having that in their memory and from being able to find water when it's convenient.
Todd, that's been great chatting. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure there are plenty of other questions. And if anybody watching has got any questions for Todd, please send them into LLS and we'll contact Todd directly and find his watering hole and discuss it again. Thank you so much.